It's a special game day, Seattle hockey fans, as one of our own gets his 100th NHL game in his hometown, no less.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken, and as I mentioned, we have someone reaching a milestone, a pretty important milestone in his hometown today. We'll get into that. But first, let me tell you today's episode of this here program, Locked On Kraken, brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, it is the one known as Ryker, Garth Evans, going to reach 100 games today. He is going to be at the Saddle Dome alongside the Seattle Kraken as they take on the Calgary Flames. And this is a special one for Garth, not just because it's 100 games, but he is from Calgary. So this is going to be super exciting. Let's hear what he had to say at morning skate.
And getting to play it in your hometown tonight, what does kind of this milestone mean to you? And then also the specialness of getting to be here to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to play 100 games in the NHL. As a kid, you just hope to play one. And to get the 100 is pretty cool to look at. For to be in Calgary is awesome. I got a lot of people coming, so I'll get to celebrate with them.
And, you know, Ryker was able to say a few other things, both about family and about this game. But I just want to chime in here. I mean, Ryker has been someone who's had his ups and downs. We'll hear from Dan Bylsma a little bit about Ryker. But I think he has a lot of promise. And I think, you know, Ryker Evans, not as much, but he's the crop of players that I think the Seattle Kraken are really leaning into in these last handful of games. You know where Zame and I land on tank or no tank. But for a team, the Seattle Kraken, that has not yet been mathematically eliminated, but is playing up against teams like Calgary, where these games do matter. These are games where you have to have your players, especially your young players, 100 games or fewer, you have to have them sharp. And so, you know, that's just something that I wanted to point out. But let's hear what else Ryker Evans had to say to Piper Shaw.
Give yourself a piece of advice, knowing what you know now on, you know, heading into game 100 that you didn't know on game one. What would you tell yourself, your younger self?
I'm not too sure. I honestly like looking at like Ebbs and those guys that play 1,000. It's pretty spectacular. So I just want to do some things that he does so I can play that long.
What's it been like for you this year, playing in so many different situations and combinations and having to adapt to the different kind of roles and, you know, partners that you've had?
Yeah, a lot of it's just learning. I think the biggest thing is just kind of try to just learn as much as possible, especially from the older guys that have been there and have won. So just learn off of them and then just trying to contribute as much as possible.
Is there a particular area that you feel you've grown the most in from game 1 to game 99, now 100?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just confidence. You kind of just reassure yourself every game that like you belong here and that you'll have an impact and help this team win games. So I think from game 1, obviously you come in, you're super nervous. I mean, you're just trying to make a statement, but now you just kind of have to do it consistently.
What's the next step that you'd like to take in your game and that you're working towards?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to play hard and then just be consistent doing that. And obviously skating is my ability, so I just have to bring that every game.
Ryker, what are you hearing from the coaches about what they want you to do more of?
Yeah, exactly that. Use my skating. It's a strong asset of mine, so just moving my feet, skating with the puck, and then being hard to play against those top guys.
Who are some of the mentors that you've had on this team through this time?
Monty, Muzz, pretty much the whole decor. I think we're pretty close, so it's been awesome to be able to share this with them.
So there you go, Ryker Evans. He talks about mentorship and talks about players on this Seattle Kraken roster. He mentioned Jordan Eberle by name, who have 1,000 games. And now that he's reaching 100, that's a goal that he has, that he wants to reach and attain. And I love that from Ryker. We also saw him smile a few times. We know he has this he gets this reputation of being maybe a little stoic or aloof at times, but he's got a personality around the folks that that know him well. And Dan Bylsma alluded to that today. Let's hear what he had to say about Ryker Evans reaching 100.
You've been with him for so long. What is the biggest difference you see in him today than you saw when you first met him?
His play, I'll say, because he's kind of a straight-faced, doesn't show a lot of emotion, both off the ice and on the ice. And I think, I'm sure he'll talk about the confidence he's gained just over the past 2 seasons playing National Hockey League games and being comfortable playing National Hockey League and knowing he belongs in the National Hockey League. And I think, even last year, he was in and out of the lineup at times, and that can wane on your confidence a little bit. But has settled into being an everyday regular at this point in time in his career, and just see his confidence continue to grow.
Dan, how do you think he can grow for the next 100 games? What can he do better or do for the team more?
I think he's at his best when he's engaged in the match. I see kind of a deadpan face, but games when you see the opposition get a little bit irritated with how physical he's playing, how aggressive he's playing, and that's both with his skating and his physicality, is when he's playing his best. And we'll see more of it in the next 100.
So there's Dan Bylsma talking about Garth, the man, the legend known as Garth, again, Ryker Garth Evans, going to reach 100 games. But again, the takeaway for me is that there's still plenty to play for the Seattle Kraken team. You heard Dan Bylsma talk about the confidence, and I mentioned today, but also we've talked about that Ryker Evans, some because of injury, and I think some because of that reset that we have attributed to the Bylsma era of the Seattle Kraken. We've seen him sit a few games. He's got 63 of his 99 tonight, of course, will be 100. 63 of his 99 games played are in this 24-25 season. He's got 5 of his 6 goals this year and 19 of his 21 assists, 19 of his 27 assists this season, 24 of his 33 points this season. Obviously, he's had more time in the NHL than last year. He's a -7 overall and a -12 on his career. The Seattle Kraken, of course, not being a team that anyone is really looking good in the plus-minus category. So definitely one of our players, our defensemen, that we are going to keep an eye on as the Seattle Kraken take on the Calgary Flames. Sounds like Ryker Evans will have a decent amount of family on hand, friends, old coaches. I wonder how many tickets he was able to scrounge up for his folks, for his people tonight. So, I'm excited to see what he can do on the ice. I think he's been a steadying force for a decent amount of those 63 games this year, but still some work to do. And that's leaning into his skill set, which, as Ryker said, is his skating. And hey, yes, I'm going to mention it one more time. This is the perfect time for a player like Ryker Evans to be able to focus on those things. And you best believe he and the rest of the Seattle Kraken better be ready for the Calgary Flames, because although the Seattle Kraken may not be en route to the playoffs, the Calgary Flames sure hope they are. So we want to keep everyone safe, keep everyone sharp, and hey, I'm okay with playing spoiler. We'll talk about this matchup in particular and then the overall standings in the National Hockey League coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of the Locked On Kraken podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We know March Madness is here. I've been working a lot with CBS Sports. Unfortunately, I have had to talk a lot about the Juju Watkins injury. But I also have talked about the Maryland Terps and that the women's and men's program have advanced to the Sweet 16. And FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action of March Madness like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra buckaroos to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. And so you can visit fanduel.com and get in on all the college hoops action. But of course, there's still hockey, future predictions. We've got, of course, the PWHL up there as well. And you can check it out all tournament long, all season long. So make sure you visit fanduel.com to get in on the action. Today's episode of Locked on Kraken also brought to you by our friends at Wonderful Pistachio. Now, if you're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, then you should crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. Now, I know some people really like to crack into a clean pistachio and don't have to worry about the shell. Other people like, maybe like the zen of it all, of cracking the shell on your own. Either way, whether you like the satisfying crack of opening each shell, like a snack meditation, or the ease of grab and go, you have what you need in Wonderful Pistachios. And these little green wonders pack a protein punch. So get snacking and get cracking, Seattle fans, with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. And thanks as always for making Locked on Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here, your host. And, talked about Ryker Evans. You heard from Ryker, 100 games tonight. Stick taps to you, Ryker Garth Evans. And this Seattle Kraken team, we know, is not on a collision course with the postseason. Unfortunately, we've only gone the one time, and it's already been 2 seasons removed now since the Seattle Kraken were able to make some waves in the postseason, taking down the Colorado Avalanche and then taking the Dallas Stars to the distance. But that doesn't mean that there isn't still something that the Seattle team can play for. And we know that there's plenty that the Calgary Flames are looking to play for. So when we look at this matchup, let's look at the head-to-head. This, of course, comes from the fantastic team over at the Seattle Kraken. Overall record for your Kraken, 65 points with a 36-5 record. 77 points with a 33-25-11 record for the Flames. At home, the Flames are 18-11-5. Your Seattle Kraken are 14-21-0 on the road. 4-5-1 in their last 10. The Kraken 5-2-3 are the Flames. Huberdeau is the leading point scorer for the Calgary Flames, 55 points on the season, while McCann and Stevenson, who's injured still, lead the team with 48 points overall. Power play edge goes to the Calgary Flames at 21.2%, and the penalty kill favors your Seattle Kraken, a 76.6% clip for the Kraken. And, with Chandler Stevenson out of the lineup. And with Chandler Stevenson out of the lineup, we heard from Dan Bylsma today that does mean that Shane Wright, but also Matty Beniers have had to step up. And what that has looked like for Shane Wright, as you heard Zame allude to and talk about, is more ice time, more minutes overall. What that's looked like for Matty Beniers is more PK time. So this is a time of year where, because of the trade deadline, because of injuries, and yes, because the Seattle Kraken are not, again, on a trajectory to make the playoffs, not mathematically eliminated officially yet, but everyone's kind of doing their best to keep the team afloat. And I think for me, that's why the idea of having this team with so much experience to gain, to ask them to tank, there's so many things high on the priority list. Now, it's very possible, as we've seen all season long, if I needed to remind you, that this Seattle Kraken team, if they play at their potential, they could still lose. And so, for those of you who are team tank, if the Seattle Kraken lose tonight, there's nothing to, well, except for the game, there's nothing to lose. They won't gain anything by winning this within the respect of this season. Now, I know that's why a lot of people say, well, hey, all the way on tank train. But my argument continues to be that there is a lot to gain. And these are significant games for young players on this Kraken team to work things through. So I don't want them to go into a mindset like, hey, let's lose this game. To me, that's team tank all the way. Now, if you go into this game, say, hey, let's try some things. Hey, this is the metric that I individually want to meet or that I want us as a team to meet. And if you meet that metric, but you'll lose the game, okay, at least you got some work in. But to say let's drop these games intentionally, not down for it. But yes, Seattle Kraken fans, I think we all know at this point in the season that it's not a given that this team is going to win. At least now, for me, this team can focus on some things that will make this team better in the future. And hopefully, even though the games don't carry significance for the Seattle Kraken and their playoff hopes for this year, the lack of consistency since the beginning of the season has been endlessly frustrating. I've said it time and time again, and I'm okay with losing. I just want to see this team tap out its potential. And I know that can be frustrating when you put everything that you have out on the ice and then you lose. That's tough. That's heartbreaking. It's gut-wrenching. We're in the middle of March Madness, right? I don't need to tell you about the drama and the heartache, the hurt heart space, as I once heard a WNBA player say. I don't need to tell you about that. But there's also some teams I'm covering who are having fantastic tournaments that had great regular seasons, that they're driving their motivation, the driving edge for them is that they know they left something in the tank last year. And to hear how that eats away at these young players, how it eats away at these coaches, that's heavy stuff. And if you ask me, there are plenty of games where this Seattle Kraken team collectively likely feels they left something in the tank. And this is a chance to remedy that, to rectify that, and to be a pro in ways that matter. And bring these young guys up, bring some of the new guys to the Kraken up in a way that's going to make this team successful at the point in time that they need to be. So, that's all I got to say about that. This is a Calgary team that this Kraken team is expecting them to be scrappy, to be hungry. And the Kraken, if they take shifts off, they got to be careful. We saw that hit that Tanev put on Shane Wright. Okay. They've got to be careful, be smart, be safe. We don't want any other injuries, especially not anything so late in the season. And a way to do that is to play the game. It's kind of like when you're merging and you keep your foot on the brake instead of, using that as a little bit of an accelerant. If you're, speeding too much or you're not even hitting the minimum speed limit, these are all things, right, that on the road can be dangerous. It's not any different in hockey. So, a little bit more about what this game means for Calgary and where Calgary specifically and your Seattle Kraken are in the standings. That's coming up on today's episode. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken, as I mentioned at the top of the show, brought to you by, if you're an everyday or an OG, or one of my favorites, and that's FanDuel. one of my favorites, and that, of course, is Game Time, because there's nothing like watching basketball. There's nothing like watching hockey live. The energy of the crowd, the sound of sneakers on the hardwood or shoulders hitting the glass, and maybe even a celebrity sighting. If you want to catch a game in person, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands of tickets. I've used Game Time a bunch when I'm in Seattle, whether I want to go to Mariners games with a good friend of mine who lives in the area, or I once got to catch one of my favorite bands, Little Dragon, in town while I was covering the Seattle Kraken. And I got to get the greatest deals and make sure I was staying within my budget by using Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Indeed, it is game time for your Seattle Kraken. They will face the Calgary Flames. A few games coming up here. This is the road game they have, and then a home game on Thursday. And the Seattle Kraken not officially mathematically eliminated, but again, it's going to be a long slog. 7th overall right now in the wild card race. A minus 19 goals or goal differential, excuse me. We are officially behind the Anaheim Ducks, who have 68 points. They sit in 6th overall. Utah still clawing for a spot, 75 points, just ahead of Anaheim in 5th. In the wild card, that is. And then the Calgary Flames just ahead of Utah, 77 points on the season. And they are pacing Vancouver and then St. Louis and Minnesota, who are in that wild card spot. At the top of the Pacific Division, you have Edmonton, followed by the LA Kings. Both of those teams, though, at 87 points. And then the Vegas Golden Knights cruising on through with a 9-2. In Central, we've got Colorado at 89 points, the Dallas Stars at 94 points, and the Winnipeg Jets, who we just love playing one-goal games with, 100 points at the top of the Central Division. If we look at the NHL overall, your top two teams, the Washington Capitals, the Caps, become the first team to officially clinch a playoff spot. Winnipeg is not far behind, then Dallas and Vegas, and Carolina to round out the top 5. Among those that are less fortunate, we've got San Jose already been eliminated, as well as Chicago. 47 points, a minus 77 goal differential for San Jose, because apparently defense is for nerds. I would say defense is for teams who tank. And when is their tanking ever done? Who knows? You would think they'd be better by now. And yet, anyway, I digress. Chicago down there as well, 51 points on the season, followed by Nashville, 60 points. Buffalo, we're climbing up at 62. Philly at 65 points, just like your Seattle Kraken. So 27th overall out of 32 teams, your Seattle Kraken, but not yet mathematically eliminated. Yes, you know how I feel at this point in time. There are things to play for. You get into a habit of losing, and I just don't know that you ever really break it, or at least you're not able to break it at will. I don't know. Maybe call me old-fashioned, call me whatever you want, but I kind of want to know that this team can actually win before I see them start to try and lose. I know the tanking conversation has been really interesting. Some great comments on YouTube. Again, I know I've mentioned this on YouTube, or in the comments section, but yes, I did not look past 2015 for a very specific reason that I'm pretty sure I explained. But again, the Seattle Kraken are not beholden to any of the draft rules prior to that. And even since 2015, things have changed. That being said, sure, you want to throw Colorado in the mix. You want to talk about what Chicago has been able to do, LA, even San Jose to an extent as far as getting to the playoffs. I get it. I totally get it. The point still stands, though. You're still looking at, if you're Colorado, I think it was 9 seasons, right? Since they got that one pick, you're looking at a decade. You're looking at a decade. And as someone has mentioned, we've had a 2 pick, we've had a 5 pick, and an 8 pick, 7 or 8, I can't remember right now. What's it going to take? It's going to take the Seattle Kraken hunkering down on development. But I will say, and I understand wanting that like generational talent. Well, here's the thing. How do the Kraken know that they're going to get the top pick or a high enough pick in the right draft class to be a generational talent? It's a super gamble. And so I think that you can use that time to build up these young guys. And a lot of people like how, our GM, Ronnie Francis, can spot talent. I think that overall, that's definitely where his talents lie, being able to build up a prospect pool. Now we have to see the vision come through on the ice and having the right team around your high prospects, which is what I've been talking about. Whether I talked about Edmonton yesterday, talked about OKC, really interesting articles, all these think pieces, right, about OKC right now, about Cleveland in the MNBA. And you get to a point where you need to surround that top talent with the right type of role players. And I think we can make an argument that the Kraken aren't quite there yet, for sure. I mean, we talk so much about what's going on with goaltending. That's been a bit of a nightmare for the Seattle Kraken, specifically with it looking like we're going to have to buy out Philip Grubauer. But, this team is not as defensively sound as I want it to be. I do think we have a great D-man core, but being able to execute defensively is not the strong suit of some of the guys that we have on this team. And they've been asked to do that, whether it's between Dan Bylsma or, of course, Dave Haxtell. So those are things that, to me, signal the front office needing to hunker down and figure out the vision of the team rather than a reason that the team should be losing games. Anyway, Zame and I are going to get into this a little bit more. We've put out an ask to our insiders as well. So if you haven't responded and you want to weigh in on to tank or not to tank, this is your chance. We're going to remix it a little bit because I think we've both made our arguments. So we're going to talk about it because, hey, what else is there to talk about with the Seattle Kraken? Just a few more games here, but it's not looking like we're playoff bound. Not mathematically eliminated yet, but yeah, one way or another, it's just not going to happen for this team. So what needs to happen for this team to, as Ron Francis said he wanted, to not just make the playoffs one and done? Yeah, we've already done that, but to be a team that can be a playoff team year in and year out. We seem a distant ways away from that, especially knowing that, again, another season is passing by with the Seattle Kraken not being able to get into the playoffs. So for me, that's more of an interesting conversation than overall tanking, because that's a massive gamble and it creates bad habits. But that's what we have. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another's. And big applause and stick taps for Ryker Evans, who will reach 100 NHL games in his hometown. We're so proud to have you as part of the Kraken. And here's what we do. We hold fast, we stay true, and loud and proud on a game day, we say, let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.